What is going on, ladies and gents? Welcome to Collectors Gone Digital. My name's Josh, and on today's episode, we're going to be recapping David's 40-minute speech at the Blackbird Sunrise event that happened late last year. It was a few days ago now where they finally started posting content, so if you guys happen to miss our live recap, I am going to drop it down below. But today's episode is going to be focused on recapping it in a shorter form. So as always, grab a drink, grab a snack, sit back, relax, and enjoy. All right, so to start things off, David begins by talking about a coin. And this particular one is a Roman coin from 307 AD. So on the right hand side, you guys are going to see a war chariot. This wasn't the exact coin that he used, but same idea. And David talks about how this chariot, or the horse and carriage, is pretty much where we started with transportation. Now you fast forward to today, and innovation's been happening for centuries. We have all the modern planes and trains. So David goes on to talk about how when we think about how to build something, and he's still talking about transportation here, what's also important for us to consider is how to transport what we end up building. And this is when he showed an image of a plane being transported on a train. So this is when David connects the example to collecting, and VeVe, actually. He said collecting's been known since 3000 BC, and the estimated size of today's market is $426 billion. He said VeVe is changing the way that you can collect, or in other words, they're offering a new method of transportation. So moving on, this is where David talks about the beginning of his entrepreneurial journey, the beginning of his relationship with Dan, the beginning of VeVe. So if you have been with the community for a little while now, you probably know all this info, but if you are newer, I am still going to skim through it. Now, David started his journey as a stamp collector. There was actually a summer where he got chickenpox and he couldn't go outside. So in his baths, he would dissolve the stamps from the boards. And that's apparently how he got a lot of his stamps at first. So the following year, I guess when he didn't have chickenpox anymore, he would go downtown and start pitching boards of these stamps to vendors who would pretty much take them on consignment. So he'd put the board up, somebody would come buy one, he would come back, take the money, and then give the shop a percentage. So that's how he started his journey. To start his first shop, he would buy some stuff from a liquidation sale and then end up, I guess, negotiating with a shop owner to take part of his shop, the front, and then the shop owner would take the back. I think he just fixed computer parts or something like that. And then that would be where David kind of set up shop to start his first store. Now, fast forwarding to when he meets Dan, this is actually when he needs a website for his business. And Dan came from the media side of things, web development and that type of stuff. Now, this is how they formed a relationship, but they've been friends for 25 years now. So fast forwarding a lot now, Dan gets to a point where he's now traveling the world. And while he's doing this over in Asia and Europe, he reconnects with David and they end up meeting in Taipei. Now, during the trip, it ends up being a blast, and they end up sharing a bunch of business ideas in terms of what they could focus on next. Now, this was during a time when a lot of news was in the media about blockchain, crypto, scams, that type of stuff. And so this would be one of the things that narrowed their focus on the space. From that point, between 2017 and 2019, in David's exact words, pitch, 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 hustle and repeat every day. Now, in terms of some key stats that he shared during the presentation, I'm not entirely sure if these were from 2022, just because of the copyright in the bottom right, or if they're from 2023. I'm confident in saying that they're not fully updated just because this is an older presentation, but at the time, VeVe had minted and sold an estimated 8.5 million collectibles, 10 million transactions in the secondary market. Both of those things would account to 2.3 billion in New Zealand dollars. The app's downloaded in 180 countries and now supports 5 languages. They have an active user base of 260,000 users. Skeptical on that, not gonna lie. I believe they classify an active user as someone who logs in at least once a month, and I just feel like that's a really good way of keeping that number high. And then nearly $117 on average in revenue per user. Now, David does also share some Google Play Store rankings. He didn't focus on the App Store, but VeVe's been ranked the #1 top grossing revenue app in the UK, the US, Italy, Australia, Canada, and Spain, However, one thing to consider here is that these are numbers from 2021. It's still an amazing accomplishment, don't get me wrong. I just don't want to mislead anyone. They're not current. Now, if you guys know David, you probably at one point heard him talk about his vision for a Netflix documentary in the future. And if it does happen, he would call it 0%. That's because in his opinion, and Dan's, this was their chance of achieving everything on their initial white paper. In fact, in his words, he said that if we did achieve everything, we could possibly rule the world. So he said they had 0% pre-revenue. Everything in terms of development costs for the app, R&D, all costs associated with trying to start the business, they had to fund or find investors for. There was nothing coming in. Now, pre-launch, no brands wanted to be first or cross-pollinate, which brings us back to a controversial topic. But no brands wanted to be the first because it was an area that wasn't fully understood yet, or even known about. We are talking about 2017, 2016 time. If you fast forward to today, you have games like Fortnite with tons and tons of IP that mix. In fact, I'll open up the store right now just to show you guys. But on screen, we got Pirates of the Caribbean, we got Deadpool and Wolverine, we have Stranger Things, among a bunch of others that are mixed together and available in the store at this very moment. VeVe is also a platform now where this happens. So I'm sure that, yes, back in the day, this would have been a conversation that would have been much more difficult to have. But I do feel like we're kind of in a time or moving into one where this is going to be much more accepted among companies. If you can't beat them, join them. And the virtual environment is exactly where that's going to happen. Next, unproven concept. No investors understood. And this goes back to, you know, it being a new product, a new offering. There were no examples of what David and Dan were pitching these investors before they were pitched. In fact, David has mentioned that many of these companies actually said no at first. And then when David and Dan went back the 9th time, they said yes. Or the brand/investor picked up the phone and called David or Dan when they heard an announcement like Disney. David also said that happened. His phone was ringing nonstop. And another thing that worked against them in the beginning was the fact that David was in debt $200,000 on his Amex card. And so this is when I think he said his advisor just said, hey, you guys don't even have a working app yet. You don't even know if anybody's going to buy this stuff. Get the money to put the app together, launch the app, and then see how it goes from there. And that's pretty much what ended up happening. But the app ended up growing way faster than they anticipated. So what has VeVe done right? And according to David, it's what you guys see on screen. So you have 3 different categories: collectibles, games, and toys. In the middle is a segment that's been identified for a group of people who enjoy all 3 fandoms. So VeVe is built on the principle that almost everyone is a fan of something. Sitting at the nexus of pop culture fandom, combines toys, games, and collectibles to offer a unique way for fans to experience the many worlds of fandom. What was interesting to hear in the speech for me was David outlining the different stages of their focus. So it went from focusing on security to focusing on community to focusing on utility. And we are going to talk a little bit more about how they're kind of moving through that process. But what's also super interesting to hear, according to David, they believe that the segment they identified in the middle here is worth about $40 billion in revenue per year. So it's important to note that I'm not talking about the market size here. We mentioned earlier how that's estimated to be $426 billion. What David is talking about here is a number that he thinks VeVe could potentially earn every single year, or at least work their way up to, provided that they properly target this segment. One type of person's going to be super happy and glad to hear that. I also understand the other side. I can see quite a few people being like, what on earth are they thinking? Like, no way they're going to do that. Now, obviously, we have no idea if this is going to happen or not. But one thing I will say is that it is all leading to gaming. So in terms of David's key takeaways, the first point here says, have your team focus on a purpose. The example that he used here was NASA and their mission to get their first astronaut on the moon. He said during this time, whether you were higher up or a janitor, everybody's purpose in the company was to land a man on the moon. It's the same thing with Elon and his Starship to Mars. Next, VeVe as a digital collectible platform is to bring the world of collecting to a global audience. which they are undoubtedly doing. This is a nascent industry. No product is alike on the market. Now, VeVe chose to be mobile first, and this was to create an easy onboarding process. There's endless storytelling with the brands, studios, and verticals they offer. The potential for a creative economy to help with growth and development is there. This was also one of the reasons why they wanted to focus on community. There are virtual showroom creations to provide a unique and engaging experience. That experience is limited right now, though. He did also cover the importance of user-generated content, which we have covered on the channel before. He actually used examples like Fortnite and Roblox, which both have their creative economies. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Whenever they open the doors to the VeVeverse, user-generated content will be on a whole other level. And the last point talks about the importance of community and understanding that VeVe actually has two customers. So you have us being the users, and then you have the brands and the artists, the licensors. So VeVe has to work to keep both sides happy. So after David's presentation, he was interviewed, and one of the questions asked him what's beyond NFTs. To make a longer story short, things like the VeVeverse. But here he talks about that process again. So he says it's all about the brands. IP is king. It's how a company survives long term. And in David's words, when you come to VeVe, you know you're getting a legitimately licensed product. But as we mentioned before, not all these brands said yes right away. So it wasn't exactly easy to get that licensed product. David said that VeVe started with a focus on security. And this is what built up the brands to go, okay, yeah, we'll put our product on your platform. So David said you focus on security. Security is what brings in the brands. The brands are what have the product. And once you have the product, then you can add utility. And not to mention that while they're doing this, new regulations are being created. So they had to navigate, and still have to, this minefield. Ladies and gents, that is going to conclude today's episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. That's a complete recap of David's 40-minute speech at Sunrise. Now, David did also happen to speak on a panel at San Diego Comic-Con about Stan Lee. His speech wasn't that long, and I did happen to watch the videos back. I don't really think they're worth recapping. But if you guys do want to check them out, they are available on X. If you guys enjoy the content, make sure to like and subscribe. Comment down below what you want to see in a future episode. And as for next, I'll catch you then.